have you guys here. And super pumped. We are starting a new series today. And so if you didn't get one of these yet, what we're going to be doing for the next 2 months is we're going to be studying 8 of the parables of Jesus. Actually, it's a little bit more than 8 because some of the weeks we're going to double up. But Jesus spoke in parables, he spoke in stories. We'll talk about that in a little bit, a lot. And what this is so starting today, I'm going to be teaching on the parable of the sower. And if you're not familiar with the Bible, this is super easy to follow along. So tomorrow, when you wake up or whenever you spend some time with God, or if you don't have a regular time that you spend with God, this is a great way to start this. So one of our deep values here at City Light is that we don't just grow in our faith by going to church, but that we cultivate what we call spiritual practices, okay? These are spiritual practices that we do on a regular basis that help us grow in Jesus. And so tomorrow morning, you'll open this up, and this week has been written by Joanna Martin. I don't know if she's here today. I don't see her. But so Joanna wrote this week. We have 8 different authors from within our church. And so tomorrow you'll read the parable of the sower again, and there's just like a couple reflection questions. It's not like a deep thing. You can get this done in a couple minutes. And then the rest of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there's different verses that connect in with the theme. Okay, so you're not reading the parable of the sower every day. You're reading different verses that connect in with the theme, couple reflection questions that you get through, and then we're on to next Sunday. Next Sunday, we're going to be doing the parable of the treasure and the pearl. So you never know what's going to happen. So the first 4 are about kind of internal. The second 4 are kind of external. It's going to be a lot of fun. So if you didn't get one, you need to get one on your way out. There's plenty. So you can have 2, 3 per household. We don't care. We made them. My least favorite thing about doing stuff like this is having 50 of these at my house after the series is over. So please take them, all right? Even if you're going to watch most of them online, I encourage you to take them. If you are watching online right now and you are someone who doesn't make it in person very often, email us and we will send you one in the mail because we want you to stick with us, okay? All right, so stories have power. And that's why we're going to be talking about this. Stories, kind of all teachers know, like good teachers know to incorporate stories, and Jesus was no different. And I'm sure that if we went around the room, everybody could tell us a story that they heard at some point in their life that impacted them. And when I said, okay, let me see if that's true. What's a story that impacted me? The first thing that came to mind was this horror story that my brother told me. And I actually remember, I can picture where I was, but I don't know where it was. Like, I think we were in Ohio, and we were around some campfire. I had family in Ohio. So we're sitting around this campfire, and he told a story about this, are there kids in here? Not really. Okay. All right. About this murderer who had a hook, and he have you heard this one? And he escaped from prison, and he told it like it had happened. Do you remember this at all? Oh yeah. And then he said they drove home, and as they were driving home, they heard this on the outside of the door, something kept knocking, and when they got home, they opened the door, and the hook was on the door, and for whatever reason, it's not that scary, right? It doesn't sound that scary. It has stuck with me my entire life. Think about that. That's 30 years ago, maybe more than 30 years ago that I heard that story, and I can still remember where I was. Well, stories have power, especially when they terrify you. So we're going to do the scariest parables that Jesus taught. Actually, some of them they're a little bit scary when you start to apply them to your life. But even our culture is a very narrative-based culture, isn't it? I was watching a movie the other day, and I thought, what am I doing? I'm just watching somebody wrote a pretend story and spent millions of dollars, and I'm just watching a pretend story that has no real meaning. It's not going to change my life. Am I wasting my time? But I still finished it. Don't worry. So yeah, so I got someone saying I'm wasting time. All right. But stories, they capture our emotions, they capture our imaginations, and I think that's part of why Jesus told parables. And we call them parables because they're stories that have a regular day understanding. So he talked about things that they would have known. If he was talking to us, he would have used different analogies, different stories. But he talked about sheep and seeds and farming and an agrarian culture, the stuff that they would have understood. But it wasn't just one thing I want you to know. It wasn't like an allegory. So some people will take these stories and they'll try to assign meaning to every little thing, right? The food that the pigs ate, the food represents no. they're stories that have an obvious meaning to the people who are there, and we want to learn from them how we can apply it to our lives, okay? And so we're going to read the whole parable of the sower. It's long. We're going to read it right now together because it's important to get the whole idea of it, and especially if you've never read it before. So there's a first section where he tells the parable, and then he has a little conversation with his closest followers about the point of parables, which is important and why we want to start with this one, because it's important we get that. And then he ends with kind of an explanation. So, you with me? Okay, we're going to read this together. Here we go. So, this is in Matthew 13, which is the first of the 4 Gospels, the 4 accounts of the life of Jesus. And it says, that same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. And such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while all the people stood on the shore. Interesting side note, I was reading in a commentary where a guy had been to Israel, been to this location, and his guide had gotten in a boat and gone back a little bit and talked, and the way that everything was shaped there, somehow, it really amplified your voice, and they could all really hear. So it's just interesting. Jesus was kind of smart. All right. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, here's an example. A farmer went out to sow his seed, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Also, side note, so their fields would have had paths in them, okay? You would have walked through the field, and there would be places that you would normally walk that would be padded down. So those would be, it's not like there was concrete or a sidewalk, okay? This was like a earth that had been walked in a lot and had gotten padded down, like a trail that you would see. So that's kind of what they're talking about there. So some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell in rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. So they had places like this where the soil would be shallow, it would be a little bit more moist, and things would spring up. But then when they planted the seed or sowed the seed, it would be a little bit wetter. But then as it got hotter, the things that couldn't dig roots down to find more water would die. And that's what he's talking about there, because the soil was shallow. When the sun came up, the plants were scorched. Sorry, I kind of ruined that. And they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell on thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear. Then the disciples came to him and said, why do you speak to the people in parables? And he replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven is words that he would use interchangeably with the kingdom of God, kingdom of God, kingdom of earth. It really refers to the rule and reign of Jesus, both now on earth and forever. Remember in the Lord's Prayer, he says for us to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so this kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God terminology is very important to the teachings of Jesus, and especially the parables. The kingdom of heaven has been given to you. So he does a lot of the kingdom of heaven is like this, okay? But not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. And whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. And he starts to quote from the Old Testament. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. So we kind of get some warnings in here, right? I think that we can apply to our lives, because we can all become like this. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For the people's hearts have become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are you, right? Because this is this awesome thing that he talks about, where he says the same thing to Thomas. He says, blessed are those who won't see and will believe, right? Blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy, but since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble and persecution come because of the word, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, and the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it, This is the one who produces a crop yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. Okay. So that was a lot. All right. So the first thing I think we should do, I've got three kind of ideas that we're going to hit today. The first one is what the disciples said. Jesus, why do you speak in parables? Why? What's the point? Why not just come out and say it clearly? Right? Why not just come out and say, hey, some of your hearts are in the wrong place, and no matter what I say, you won't receive it. He could have just said that. It would have been simpler. So why does he speak in parables? And there's a couple reasons. One of the reasons he speaks, here's some of the purposes, and then we'll talk about the reasons. So the purposes for parables is to explain to us the kingdom of God, which I touched on a little bit. So he talks about the surprise of the kingdom. A lot of his parables will say, you were expecting this, but actually this, okay? You were expecting a military coup, but instead I'm going to come be a servant. So there's parables kind of in that line explaining and articulating the difference of what they were expecting with what he is actually doing. See, these parables aren't explaining what's going to happen. They're often talking about what is happening right now. His parables explain the upside down values of the kingdom, like the one where people come to work for him. In the beginning of the day, they start working, and then more people come to work in the middle, and more people come to work at the end, and then some guys come work for an hour, and then he pays them all the same, because he told the guys at the beginning, I'll pay you X amount of money, and he said the same thing to everybody, so he gives everybody that, and then the guys were like, well, we worked longer, and he says, are you envious because I am generous, right? He was happy to pay everyone the same. What was it to them? So that's an example of upside down kingdom. He's explaining, listen, the ways you think about money, the ways you think about relationships, the kingdom of God flips a lot of that on its head. And most of them drive you to some sort of decision about the kingdom of God. What will you do about the kingdom of God in your life? So it's a teaching about the kingdom of God. And some of the reasons why he does this is, first, he speaks in parables so he can speak boldly about the truth, okay? But allow it to us to kind of move towards him too, right? He doesn't just come out and say it clearly, because he's looking for hearts that are hungry, hearts that will look, hearts that will come after, who will dig into it. And secondly, remember, this is happening in real time for him. He is also very aware that he needs to watch the clock, okay? So he's not like, you remember the time where they took Jesus to the edge of the cliff to throw him off, and then he's like, it's not time yet, and somehow just walks away and no one throws him off. I love that story, but he is often hedging his bets a little bit and not coming out and saying everything super clearly, because he's biding his time, because he has a mission. He knows where he needs to go before he ends up in Jerusalem and gets crucified. And if you read the narrative, the closer he gets to that ending point, the clearer his teachings get. The more, there's a point at the end where the disciples say, why didn't you just say this, basically? But so some of the purpose of parables is to cloak it a little bit from the people who would be trying to use his words to get him in trouble. And it wasn't time yet. So this is a New Testament scholar who says the parables spoke to the crowds. The parable spoke to the crowds to not simply convey information or just mask it, but to challenge the hearers. So it put forth a challenge to, will you lean in? Will you dig in deeper? Okay, so that's a little bit just for the whole series. Why did Jesus teach in stories? It was often to explain something about the kingdom of God in a way that wasn't just in your face, but it invited you to lean in. It invited you to ask questions. It invited you and challenged you to search your heart. And if your heart was hard, you wouldn't do that. And he was cloaking it from people whose heart was hard, and from people who would maybe take what he was saying and try to kill him for it. Okay? All right, so now I'm going to do something I don't usually do. They tell you when you give a teaching to have a main point. I don't. I have two main points. There's two main points happening in this, and I couldn't bring myself to get rid of one of them. So just bear with me, okay? But I think they're both equally important. You guys okay? I'm sorry I'm sniffing. I have a pretty bad cold, and I know it might sound weird to you guys, but there. All right, so here we go. The first one is an encouragement to be a generous scatterer. And I don't even know if that's a word, but part of what is happening, and I think the main point of this story is he's telling it to his disciples, and he's saying, I am scattering and not everyone's listening. you will scatter and not everyone will listen. If you were to boil down the parable of the sower, that is what is happening. He's training his disciples and therefore us for being scatterers and saying, look, not everyone's going to accept what you say. And here's some different reactions you'll get, but don't let that discourage you. You need to just keep scattering. And that is really, if you boil it down, the main point. So what I would take from that for us is, number one, don't give up. So you might have people in your life that you have shared the gospel with, or that you have showed the gospel to, that you're praying for. It could be a family member. It could be someone at work that you've been like, quote unquote, working on. You know, like how many of you, don't raise your hand, how many of you have lists like in your head? Like you have a list of like these people you want to invite to church at some point. You're praying for them. You want to bring them closer to Jesus. And we can get discouraged because we're like, obviously it's not working. But the thing is, that's not really up to us. Our job is just to keep scattering the seed. Keep scattering the seed. And you don't know when the soil will change. You don't know when God will be working underneath the surface and when the soil will change. I can tell you, we've had people show up to our church, and I'm like, hey, how'd you hear about the church? I'm like, well, I got a mailer 2 years ago. And I've just had it on my fridge. This literally has happened. I've had it on my fridge, and we keep saying, we got to go to church, we got to go to church. And then it's just the right time. You just don't know. You just have to keep scattering. Don't give up. Be a generous sower. It reminds me of Dory, just keep swimming. Just keep sowing. I mean, this is, I know I'm very much an extrovert, but I was at Old Navy last week on Saturday buying an outfit for Easter because I wanted my son to take me, and it's like reverse, right? When they're younger, you dress them. When you get older, they dress you. So I was like, hey, come help me pick out a good outfit for Easter. And so, I figure a dressing room is a good place to tell people about Jesus. Wouldn't you agree? You're already vulnerable. You can't go anywhere. And so, I don't know, there's this lady and her daughter in the like stall next to us. Not like, when we came out of the stall, we had clothes on, right? So it wasn't inappropriate. Just wanted to clarify. And like we started talking. Like the daughter was like showing off her, and I was like, that's awesome. And I didn't just lean in right away. Like there was natural interaction. And I was like, you guys look super familiar. Like, did you go to one of my soccer camps or blah, blah, blah? They're like, no, okay. So I was like, well, what's the harm? Tomorrow's Easter, right? So the next time they came out, I said, well, maybe you were supposed to know each other, right? I just gave them a card, and I said, hey, we have Easter tomorrow at my church. Like, whatever. I don't know. That's what I think. I feel like that's scattering seed. I just throw the seed. I don't know what's going on. That heart could be deep, deep soil that's been waiting for a seed, and you don't know. Right? I don't want to be the one who's like, that soil's probably not ready. That's not the point of this parable. The parable is just keep sowing. Just keep sowing. Don't worry about the path and the rock and the thorns. Just keep sowing and let the seed fall where it may, and let me handle the rest of it. And so let me just encourage you. If you're one of those people who's a seed sower, don't give up. God is using you, and you won't always see the harvest. If you're one of those people who is extra kind to the waitress and gives a little bit of extra attention to the person who works at the gas station and always like is there for their friends, and answers the texts and prays for the person and helps the person on the side. Like if you're one of those seed scatterers, don't give up. Because you don't know what's happening, and you might not get to see it. That seed, like God has his hand on that seed. And when they turn their heart, if they turn their heart, God will produce a harvest there. So be encouraged if you're a seed scatterer. And can I just say one more thing about this story, and then we'll switch to the other point. And when I read this story, I sometimes feel an indictment on the church. And so the first seed doesn't grow because there's a lack of understanding, okay? So it says the seed is sown on the path, right? But it doesn't grow because they don't understand it. And the second seed doesn't grow because there's no roots, right? So the second seed, it grows up a little bit, but then when life gets hard, like specifically about faith, when it gets hard to be a Christian because of the way life is going, they fall away because their roots aren't deep enough. And I just think, isn't it our calling to help people understand and to help people grow roots? Like when I read that, I just think, man, this is where the church, we can step in. This is discipleship. Go make disciples of all nations. This is part of our calling. And so some of you, listen, you're really good at helping people understand the gospel. So you could be one of those people who literally is like The seed fell on a path, but you came and turned that path into good soil because you built a bridge. I know there's a lot of analogies going on there, but just stick with me. You built a bridge, right? You built a bridge to go from no understanding to understanding. What is it that's standing in the way? I've talked to so many people right now who, because of just the way culture's been the last few years, they have all these roadblocks about Christianity that may or may not be accurate. Sometimes you just need to agree with it and be like, yes, that is a problem in some churches, but let me talk to you about Jesus. But some of you are really good at that, and some of you are really good at helping people grow roots. Some of you can come along someone, and you can see their faith beginning to wither because they're going through a hard time, and you can step into that moment, and you can say, let me help you grow your roots a little deeper. Let's see what the Bible really says about that. Let's get into prayer. Let's get you into a small group, right? Small groups are like greenhouses that help all of our roots grow deeper. That should be on our website. That's a good one. Write that down. Do you like that? Whew, that just came to me. Man, that's worth the price of admission right there. You guys can all go home now. There's nothing better coming up, trust me. All right, so encouragement is to be a generous scatterer. Now let's go to the other side. So that's really what it's meant. But in the parable, we learn about the challenge, which the challenge is about our hearts. Now listen, if you're here today or you're listening online and you're one of those first couple seeds where you're like, I don't know, like I used to be excited about God, but I've kind of lost the excitement, or I've never really followed Jesus. Like we planted City Light on purpose to find people who are maybe far from God or have left the faith or have gotten upset with church. And we want to be a place where you can rediscover Jesus and rediscover a healthy church community. And so if that's you, I just want to encourage you, when we're done, we always have prayer on the side. When we're done, we want to invite you to get prayer. Because today can be a day where you take a step towards Jesus instead of just staying where you are. It can be a day to take that seed and water it a little bit, okay? For the rest of us, I think we fall in between the third and the fourth one. So if you've been a follower of Jesus, most likely where this parable is going to challenge you and challenge me is this: the worries of life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. And that's the challenge, that the hearers would have a chance to hear. Now, when you hear that, do you think about other people or do you think about yourself, right? That's what Jesus often would do. He would challenge us to apply it to our hearts. And so are we producing fruit or is the fruit being choked out? Are we producing fruit or is the fruit being choked out? And that's really the challenge. So here's the question as we close. Is anything holding us back from producing fruit in God's kingdom? And that's a question I think we can all ask honestly to ourselves without beating ourselves up, without getting like condemning or judgmental or whatever. But literally, like, what's holding me back? Is anything? Or do you feel like, yeah, man, I'm really in a good place, which is good. That could be really good. But you might find that there's some things that are holding you back. Like, what things would I struggle to give up if God asked me to give them up? Is there anything in your life that sometimes you wonder, like, should I be doing that? Should I be saying that? Should I be watching that? Should I be partaking in that or whatever? Is there anything that would be hard for you to give up? What do you do that makes you feel further from God? Is there anything you do in your life that makes it makes you feel further from God? And then why do we keep doing it? We all have those, don't we? Like, what is it in your life? So I'm just like, I know I turned to the ship kind of hard there. Sorry. You're like, man, we were all just like happy on a mission, and now all of a sudden you're telling us we got problems. But look at the soil of your life, right? And just ask, like, is there anything that is choking out the fruit? Because the majority of people in here, you've got the roots, you've got the seed, you've been in the faith, but now, over time, life grows up around that, and it can start to restrict it. I think that's where kind of nominal Christianity comes in, where you're just a Christian because you believe the beliefs and you go to church, but there's not real fruit in your life. Do we see the fruit of character in how you treat other people? Do we see the fruit of ministry? If we're following Jesus, we're all called to be ministers, right? We're all called to be using our gifts to help people get closer to Jesus. I mean, that's literally, we're on this planet to be the light of the world. So we just remind ourselves, like, what is standing in the way, if anything, from us being who God's called us to be, from producing fruit? What do you think that fruit's supposed to look like in your life? What routinely interferes with me doing what God has called me or commanded me to do? So for me, I'll say one thing I think I struggle with is busyness. Sometimes I think I'm so busy that I wonder if I'm actually interruptible for God. Like, could God direct my steps to do something any given moment, any given day? Could he call me to pray for that person, or to be generous with that person, or to serve that person? Or have I got my calendar so full that there's no room for God? And that's one that I personally struggle with, because I like to have my plate both metaphorically and actually overflowing, okay? I like to live my life on the edge of being overwhelmed. I know maybe you can talk to me about how that's a problem, but I do. I like to have a lot of stuff going on. I get bored easily, and so I like to do that. I've always been like that, and I think I've learned over the years how to do it in a healthy way. I still have margin. I still have a Sabbath. I still make time for my family, right? But I like to have that fullness, and I sometimes wonder if I push it too far, in the sense that, am I really available for God or not? Maybe that's you. Maybe it's something else for you. Maybe there's something else that keeps you from doing what God's called you to do. Maybe it's fear. Maybe you struggle with fear, and you just don't know if you can trust God to step out, or trust God to take that risk, or, maybe for you it's, I was going to say overcommitment, but I guess that's the same as busyness, isn't it? Yeah, okay. Maybe you're afraid. Just kidding, that's a joke. It's the same as fear. Maybe for you it's insecurity, right? Like, you just aren't sure if you really know enough or have enough, like, knowledge of the Bible, knowledge of God to really, whatever, right? There's all these things. So is anything standing in the way for you? This is a good one. Whose opinion do I care about more than God's? Like, do you care about, like, do you want to be accepted by the people that you work with? Do you want to be accepted by the people in your life? Like, do you care about your friend's opinion? Do you care about culture's opinion? These are things I think, like, when I sit down and I think, okay, I'm 46, I've been a Christian for 30-some or 40-some years. How does this apply to me? That's a question I ask myself pretty much every time I teach. And if I can't figure it out, then I have no right in talking to you about it. So this is how it applies to me, is where are the pressure points where my faith in the fruit of my faith is being choked out by my life? And am I following Jesus in a way where I'm saying, all that I am and all that I have is yours. And you, God, are above everything. You're above my schedule. You're above my money. You're above my family, right? Not in an unhealthy way. But you are first. And I want to lay my life down at the foot of the cross and say, I will follow you with all that I have, right? You could turn it internally too. You could say, what am I unwilling to deal with about myself? What is it that is in my character that my friends have been telling me about, my spouse has been telling me about, that God's been talking to me about in my quiet times, and I just don't want to deal with it? What is something that is, like, just in there? Some anger issue, some lust issue, some greed issue. Like, what are the things that are holding us back? I wonder what would happen if we just were like, you know what, I'm going to go to the doctor, right? This is a metaphor. And I'm going to say, doctor, what's wrong? What are the things that I could do to be healthier spiritually? But we do that with life all the time physically, but how often do we think about our spiritual health? Right? What are we doing that is maybe holding us back, or what are we not doing that would help us grow? Worship team, you guys can come up. So, I think if we take the parable of the sower, I know it's, I broke the rules. I made 2 points instead of 1. But here's really, there's 2 things. He's saying 2 things. And I think both of us can hear both of them. First of all, God has us on a mission. And this is interesting because this whole series, half of it's going to be about internal and half of it's going to be about our mission. But we need to hear this. You and I are on a mission. We are called to be scatterers. And I hope that you hear that encouragement today. And I pray that you would begin to see more and more opportunities. Like, one of our values at City Light is to be intentionally invitational. We want to be inviters. And like I said, I mean, maybe not in dressing rooms. You don't have to do that. That's fine. You can draw some boundaries. But, like, we want to be inviters. We want to be inviting people to City Light, to the life of Jesus. And it doesn't matter if they come to our church, but we want to be invitational. That's how we bring people to know Jesus, is to share with them what God's done in our lives. And also, take this challenge. Take this week, grab the booklet, make sure on your way out, read through it, and allow the Lord to do some work in the soil, quote unquote, of your heart. Allow the Lord to look into your heart. Maybe God could reveal one thing that he wants to work on in your heart. One thing that he wants to tweak, or wants to, prune, to cut off, or something that he's trying to teach you. God has so much for you and so much for me. And every time we make time to be with him, there's more that he can share with us. So I just want to encourage you in that moment just to keep digging deeper.